China has fired a direct message in response to Australia declaring Beijing's claim in the South China Sea illegal, accusing Canberra of recklessly making provocations and blindly following the United States. Through newspaper it declared sanctions on beef and wine exports are warranted and the broken diplomacy between the two is unsalvageable. The relationship between China and Australia has now deteriorated to a very bad point and the chance for a turnaround is slim in the near future, according to the article penned by Guangdong Research Institute professor Zhou Fangyan. One of the main reasons is that Australia's policy lacks independence and its current choice is to closely follow the US lead. If Australia further provokes China, not only on political relations, but also economic relations, the damage to Australia should be expected. The paper claims Australia is not as tactful as its Five Eyes alliance partners the United Kingdom and Canada, accusing the Morrison government of aggressively following Washington's lead against China. It should be said that so far Australia has not learned a great lesson, Fangyan's article said. If it still insists on going on the current path, the possibility that China will take strong countermeasures cannot be ruled out. For example, China could target substitutable agricultural products such as beef and wine. The diplomatic relationship between Australia and China soured when Canberra led calls for an international investigation into the initial outbreak of the coronavirus pandemic in Wuhan. Increasingly fraught war of words flirted with aggression last week when 5 Australian warships were reportedly confronted by the Chinese Navy near the Spratly Islands in the South China Sea. But this recent response published in the country's propaganda outlet is a direct retaliation for Australia filing a declaration at the United Nations in New York, rejecting China's maritime claims as being inconsistent with the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea. Escalation comes just days before an upcoming ministerial meeting between the US and Australia, Osman, leading researcher, the University of Sydney's United States Studies Centre, has urged the two governments to narrow their focus on China at the strategic meeting. The top research institute recently outlined a policy framework for Australia and the US, claiming the alliance has never had a more urgent time to show leadership. China's Belt and Road Initiative, its island grabbing in the South China Sea, military force in the Taiwan Strait, its annexation of Hong Kong's legal system and the recent clashes at the border with Indian forces reveal a menacing strategy for regional control, the center said. While the United States has been largely distracted during COVID-19 with its own domestic concerns, China has taken advantage of an uncertain regional situation to advance its expansive geopolitical interests in key flashpoints across the Indo-Pacific. U.S. provocations around the South China Sea are getting intensified in July. Right on the occasion of the 4th anniversary of the ad hoc tribunal ruling on the South China Sea arbitration, on July 13, the U.S. Secretary of State, Mike Pompeo, issued the statement U.S. position on maritime claims in the South China Sea, saying that Beijing's claims to offshore resources across most of the South China Sea are completely unlawful, as is its campaign of bullying to control them. Statement denies China's lawful territorial or maritime claim to Mischief Reef or Second Thomas Shoal, and refused to recognize James Shoal roughly 20 meters below the surface as a part of China. On the second day after Pompeo's statement, the U.S. Navy Arleigh Burke-class destroyer USS Ralph Johnson DDG-114 arrived in the waters near the Nansha Islands to carry out the so-called Freedom of Navigation operation. This year, the U.S. Navy has carried out at least 6 such operations and conducted various other operations to demonstrate their military presence. The U.S. Air Force often sends bombers over the area. What's more, aircraft carriers USS Nimitz and USS Ronald Reagan held an exercise in the South China Sea on July 17, the second time in a month. 2 aircraft carrier battle groups carried out the same exercise on July 4. This was the first dual-carrier military exercise conducted by the U.S. Navy in the South China Sea since 2014. The series of actions fully exposed the U.S. intention to further contain China. Although the COVID-19 epidemic has left its deep scar in the country, the Trump administration has still escalated its military operations in the South China Sea, which are more aggressive and provocative than before. The U.S. militarization has become the biggest threat to peace and stability in the South China Sea. Historically, the U.S. has long adopted a neutral stance on disputes over the sovereignty and maritime rights of the South China Sea. Whether it was the conflict between China and Vietnam around the Johnson South Reef in 1988, or the Mischief Reef dispute between China and the Philippines in 1995, the U.S. government at that time basically remained neutral and hoped that the South China Sea dispute could be resolved peacefully. Fundamentally speaking, the bottom line of the U.S. on the South China Sea issue for a long time had been that any conflict in the South China Sea should not affect its freedom and safety of navigation. After President Obama took office in 2008, he made a series of adjustments to the U.S. global strategy. The South China Sea issue has gradually become an important starting point for his Asia-Pacific rebalancing strategy. The Obama administration then frequently intervened in the South China Sea issue, including the release of the U.S. policy on the South China Sea in 2014 and the launch of the Freedom of Navigation Operations program in 2015. All this had changed the original geo-strategic situation and made the South China Sea issue increasingly one of the core aspects of Sino-US. During the Trump administration, the contention between China and the U.S. around the South China Sea issue has become more intense. The U.S. regards the issue as the top priority of its Indo-Pacific strategy and has gradually escalated its militarization actions in the South China Sea, making the situation there more perilous. Pompeo's recent policy statement has completely overthrown the neutrality stance adopted by previous U.S. administrations on the issue, and has clearly taken sides and antagonized China. The statement runs counter to the international practice that in international disputes over sovereignty and maritime rights and interests, non-related parties should not be involved in. The recent statement fully demonstrates the U.S. bullying diplomacy. According to the Wall Street Journal, this statement marks the U.S.'s departure from the previous practice of not taking sides on maritime disputes in the South China Sea, and may indicate that the U.S. will increase its efforts to challenge China's sovereignty claims through military, diplomatic or legal means. On the one hand, the policy change reflects that in the face of the continuous spread of COVID-19 in the U.S., the Trump administration has continued to pass the buck to China for its failed anti-pandemic policy, divert attention from the mounting domestic problems, and take advantage of the issue to win over voters for re-election in the latter half of the year.